What's up, everybody? So, you know that we all have many kinds of traits, whether we like them or not, right? We got them from our parents. Now, these traits, for example, big nose, height, eye color, hair color, whatever, so many traits. Wouldn't it be cool if there was a way that you could predict what kind of traits your kids would have? Well, guess what? There actually is a way that you can predict what kind of traits an offspring would have based on what the parent's DNA is. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about in this video. It's called monohybrid and dihybrid crosses. And it sounds complicated, but trust me, it's pretty cool and it's not that difficult. So we're going to start off with this guy here. Who is this guy here? His name is Phineas, right? And just like the rest of us, he's made up of billions of cells. These cells have a lot of organelles like mitochondria and so on, and a nucleus, right? And a nucleus is the place where what is? Our DNA, right? Our DNA, our genetic code, our instruction manual, what makes us, what causes us to be the way we are, right? Now, our DNA is stored in the form of chromosomes, okay? Chromosomes. So they're not just a long string floating around there. They're stored in the form of chromosomes, and specifically stored as 23 pairs. So altogether, we have 46 chromosomes, but it's stored as 23 pairs because each pair will have one from your mother and one from your father. So in reality, we have 46 individual chromosomes, okay? But 23 pairs. Now, if we take a look at one pair of chromosomes, so let's say this one, let's say this is pair 5 or whatever, just some random one. If we look at our mom's DNA, or we look at we know that, right? We have one from our mom, one from our dad. If we look at our mom's chromosome and we look at this top part here and we see, okay, this part is going to code for height, okay? The dad's chromosome, the corresponding part will also code for height. So the gene for height for both parents on this chromosome will be in the exact same place. So for example, this place, both parents will code for eye color. This one will code for hair color, right? So you need to understand that on a chromosome, a specific trait like height or hair color or something will be at the same location on a chromosome, okay? So we call this location locus. Let me put the word here. Locus. So our chromosomes will have many loci. One locus here, one locus here, overall many loci. And each locus for both of the chromosomes will code for a specific trait, like height, okay? And this will be the genes for it. So the genes will be in the same locus. Remember, genes is just a sequence of DNA that's going to code for a specific trait, okay? So now we know that this locus here could be for height, this one could be for something else, right? Now we know that our parents do not have the same genes, right? Your mom may have a certain gene for height and your dad may have a certain gene for height, right? So this means that although they have the same gene here, they have a different version of it. We call this alleles. So your mom's version will be different from your dad's version. Your mom's allele will be different from your dad's allele. So we call this allele, the version of the gene. So we have many loci. Each locus will be for a different characteristic. Each locus will have the gene for that characteristics on the same place, okay, as the dad and the mom's. And the dad and the mom may have a different version or allele of that gene. For example, your mom or your dad may have a dominant allele, or your mom or your dad may have a recessive allele. Okay, so again, we're focusing on this part here. Real quick for now, if you don't know, I recommend you check out the SL video where we talk about genetics in one of the videos. Now, for now, a gene can be dominant or recessive. This means that a dominant gene is one that can mask a recessive gene. So for example, here I color coded it. We'll say this one is dominant and this one is recessive. The dominant one will normally mask the recessive one. So in the presence of a dominant allele, the recessive one shouldn't matter. So for example, say your mom has the gene for tall height or whatever. We're not necessarily just referring to height. We're referring to any kind of gene. Say your mom has the strong gene for that strong allele for the specific characteristic, and your dad has the weak one, just because your mom passed you the strong one, you're most likely to express or have the characteristic of the strong one. Okay, so the dominant one basically overpowers this recessive one. It like overpowers it. Okay, so you can, for any given characteristic, you may either have one dominant and one recessive. You may have both dominant. You may have both recessive, right? So you'll have different allele combinations depending on the gene. So on this scenario, we can see both of this characteristic of height, the mom and the dad gave a different allele. One gave dominant, one gave recessive. Same for this specific trait. And then these, they're the same alleles were given, okay? So I hope you get this basic understanding here. So let's move on. So get this. So height, I used height for the sake of simplicity, but in reality, height is a gene, is a characteristic that is influenced by so many genes, not just one gene, so many genes. So we're gonna now pick a characteristic that is only influenced by one gene, only one gene, okay? Because then it will make it more accurate to what we're talking about today. So we're gonna pick this characteristic, having a free or attached earlobe. So notice in this picture, this person has a free earlobe, meaning it's not attached to the skin. And this person has an attached earlobe, meaning it's attached to the skin, right? You can see the difference. Now, this characteristic is actually influenced by one gene. So we're gonna say this characteristic is on this locus, okay? This locus. Now, normally when we pick a characteristic, we gotta assign it a letter. Okay, so in this case, I'm gonna say F because free earlobe, whatever. I'm just choosing a random letter. It doesn't really matter which one you choose. Now, when I say choose a letter, don't be stupid and pick something like O or S or X, C or V, because these, guess what? The capital letter looks the same as the lowercase letter. So if you're writing a test or something, your teacher will try and read and be like, oh, what is the student writing? Is that lowercase or capital? You know what I mean? So don't use these kind of letters because they're hard to see the difference between lowercase and capital letter. So pick a thing like F where it's clearly like different. Now, so we're picking F. Now, for if a allele is dominant, we have to give it the capital F. If it is recessive, we give it the lowercase f, okay? So ignore the colors, okay? I just made the colors so it's visual and even easier to understand, but in reality on your test, you're not gonna have colors or anything, you're just gonna have letters. So just focus on the concept of the letters because that's what really matters. The color is not gonna be there on your test, okay? So we're giving it a capital F if it's dominant and recessive, we're giving it lowercase. So coming back to this picture. So how can you have a free earlobe? So free earlobe is an autosomal dominant gene. So this means it is autosomal. This means that it is on one of the chromosomes that is not the X or Y chromosomes. One of the chromosomes that is not the sex chromosomes. Okay? So any of those chromosomes. So it's autosomal. And it is dominant, meaning the way that you can have this trait is if you have one dominant allele, at least one dominant allele. So to have this trait, you can either be capital F or capital F lowercase f, because capital F means you have both dominant alleles, and lowercase f and capital F and lowercase f meaning you still have at least one dominant allele. So you will express this trait. So you can clearly see here how dominant alleles outweigh recessive alleles. So even though there's a recessive allele here, okay, the dominant one matters more and the person will have a free earlobe. Okay, so how do you have an attached earlobe? The only way, there's only one way, is if you are homozygous recessive. This means you have both of your alleles, homo means the same, so both of your alleles are the same, homozygous recessive, and recessive meaning they're lowercase, so they're homozygous, the same, recessive, whereas this one is homozygous dominant, and this one is heterozygous because they're different, okay? So based on this, if this is your dad's DNA, remember your dad, just like you, has one from his mom, one from his dad, and your mom has one from their dad, one from their mom. So if we look at your dad's DNA, what is he? Is your dad gonna have a free or attached earlobe? They have a dominant and recessive allele, meaning they're dominant or recessive, so they'll have a free earlobe. How about your mom? Your mom has two dominant alleles. She has double capital F, meaning she will have a free earlobe. So both of these people will have a free earlobe. Now, like I said, what we're going to learn today is prediction. How can we predict what their kids, what you will have. If these are your parents, what will you have? Will you have a free or attached earlobe? Let's see. Okay, so oh yeah, by the way, the order doesn't matter. See how here I wrote like this person's. So this person's alleles are capital F, lowercase f, right? So it doesn't matter if you write lowercase, capital, then uppercase. It doesn't matter. The order doesn't really matter. It's just by convention. So by convention, we normally write the capital letter first. Okay, it doesn't matter much though. Okay, so here we go. Now we're gonna have a flow diagram, and then we're gonna look at the actual monohybrid cross grid. Okay, and you'll see what that means. So here we have the mom. Again, we're looking at this, focusing on this one gene because we're looking at one trait. So remember, the mom has a free earlobe because this is her alleles. And your dad has a free earlobe because this is his alleles. Okay. Now we know meiosis is going to make sure that you make a cell that has one chromosome, right? Half the amount of DNA. So meiosis, if you don't know what meiosis is, you got to make sure you watch that. But your mom, before she has a kid, she makes a bunch of egg cells, and your dad will make a bunch of sperm cells. And these cells are unique because they have half the amount of DNA. So they only have one chromosome. They only have one chromosome per pair. So they don't have two versions of it. They only have one version. So remember, here we have one mom version, one dad version. Meiosis makes you have one version. And then when you do fertilization, the version from your mom will combine with the version from your dad, and then you'll form an offspring that will have now one version from mom, one version from dad, right? So we can see here, if meiosis decides to pass on this one, okay, from the mom, and this one from the dad, then the offspring will have this combination. So we can see here, they will have capital F, both dominant, so they will have a free earlobe. Was this the only possibility? Right? No, right? There is other things that could have happened, and the way we determine this is by doing a monohybrid cross, okay? So, mono means single, okay? So we're only considering here a single gene. So a monohybrid cross is a little diagram we make that's going to figure out what the offspring could have if we know the genes of the parents regarding a single trait. Okay, so in this case, the trait was the earlobes. So what we're going to do here is have this column. This basically is mom, and this one is dad, or this is parent 1, this is parent 2, whatever you like. And we're going to write their alleles here. So remember, the mom, if we go back here, the mother had capital F, so we're going to write that down here. Capital F. And again, ignore the color. It's not about the color. And the father had what? Capital F, lowercase f. So we write that here. Now we can see what the possible combinations are. If the mom, because remember, meiosis passes on one of these. Meiosis could have passed on this one or this one. In the mom's case, either way, she passes on a dominant one. In the dad's case, he passed on this one, but he could have passed on this one as well. So the offspring could have had a different outcome. So now this little diagram makes it nice and easy to figure out the possible combinations that could have happened. So what we're going to do here is look at the genotype and the phenotype of the possibilities. So if the mom passed on this one, the dominant allele, and the dad passed on this one, what would the genotype of the kid be? Capital F, lowercase f. What about the phenotype? So remember, the genotype is the allele combination, and the phenotype is the actual characteristic that happened because of the genotype. So with capital F, lowercase f, what would the phenotype be? Free earlobe. Okay, and we can open the rest, and we can see that if the mom passed on this one, dad passed on this one, it'd be the same thing. If the mom passed on this one and dad passed on this one, it would be now this, okay? So now they would have the genotype would be capital F, but the phenotype would still be free earlobe, okay? And the same here. So what we can notice from this monohybrid cross, again, this is a cross for one specific gene. When you know the parents' genes to figure out the kids' combination. So we can see from this monohybrid cross that the offspring, no matter what, would have had a free earlobe. It was impossible for him not to have a free earlobe. But the genotype could have differed. He could have either had capital F, lowercase f, or capital F, okay? So there was two different combinations that could have happened for the genotype. But for the phenotype, no matter what, he would have had a free earlobe. Now let's look at another example. What if the parent's DNA was like this? What if the mom was heterozygous, so meaning she had a capital F and a lowercase f, and the dad was also heterozygous? What would have happened then? Let's see. So now, what makes this useful is we can quickly figure it out. Instead of going to this thing and trying to think of all the combinations and then drawing it out to see what the offspring could have, right? This takes ages. So what's nice about this is you just quickly write down their things in this table and you'll get all the options, all the combinations that could have happened. So let's see. If we fill out this table now, what do we notice? So notice the child can have both a free earlobe or an attached earlobe. Both possibilities existed. Okay? If the mother passed on the lowercase f and the dad passed on the lowercase f, he could have had the genotype of this and they could have had an attached earlobe, even though both of his parents have a free earlobe, right? Because if you have a capital F, lowercase f as your alleles, this is a dominant gene, meaning you're going to have an attached earlobe. I mean a free earlobe, right? A free earlobe. So both the mom and the dad had a free earlobe, but somehow the kid got an attached earlobe. See, that's crazy, right? This is something that may not be obvious to understand, but now it makes sense. Okay, so this is based on the idea of dominant and recessive. So, but it's very rare. The possibility of getting this is 1 in 4 because all the other ones will give you all the other possibilities give you a free earlobe. So it's 1 in 4 chance that you will have an attached earlobe if both your parents are heterozygous. Okay, so the other possibilities again were free earlobe, free earlobe, free earlobe, but the genotypes mattered. You could have had this one, you could have had this one, and this one, and this one, right? So that's what's quite useful about this monohybrid cross. Okay, it quickly shows you what the possibilities are. Okay, so that's interesting. The key takeaway from this is even though your parents do not necessarily possess this trait, you could still have it if they are heterozygous. Okay, if they both have one recessive trait, because that could mean you could ultimately end up with both of those recessive alleles and therefore have a different phenotype. Okay. Now, that was monohybrid cross for you, okay? Not so bad, right? What is a dihybrid cross? Okay, so a dihybrid cross is basically the exact same thing as a monohybrid cross, except now we consider two alleles. Not two alleles, we consider two traits. So let's say we consider this trait here and this trait. So we know this trait here is going to be for the earlobe thing. So what is this trait going to be? Let's go find what this trait will be. We'll go to that now. But the concept's going to be the same. So your mom will undergo meiosis. She will either pass on this chromosome or that chromosome, right? We can see. So in this case, meiosis caused her to pass on this one. And your dad will either pass on this one or that one. And in this case, he passes on this one. And that will again result in a kid who will have this combination, right? Just as we just talked about it. So now the only difference is from before is now we're looking at two genes instead of just one. So let's give this gene a characteristic. What is this characteristic going to be? We're going to make it the hitchhiker's thumb. Okay, so in this gene, you'll either have this kind of thumb, a very bendy thumb called hitchhiker's thumb, or a straight thumb. Okay, so again, we're looking at this locus here. Okay, now this gene is autosomal recessive. So the only way you can have this bendy thumb is if both of your alleles are recessive. Okay, so let me show this. So the only way you can have this is if both of your alleles are lowercase, recessive. Okay, if you don't have both of them recessive, then you'll have a straight thumb. That's why the straight thumb is far more common than this one. Okay, so you get this concept. So for example, if you look at the dad here, what will the dad have? Straight thumb. The mom, straight thumb, because they're both heterozygous. They have one dominant, one recessive. But this gene is autosomal recessive, meaning the only way you can have it is if you are recessive, meaning you have both lowercase letters. Okay. Okay. So here we go now. So like I said, we're looking at two genes now. So here we have one person and another person. So now we got to figure out what they can pass on. Because remember, for the monohybrid cross, it was easy. All we had to do was look at their chromosome and see. They could pass on a capital F or they could pass on a capital F, all right? And then we write it in the table. And the dad was able to pass on a lowercase f and then uppercase f. We write in the table. Now, how does it work with two genes? Okay, how does it work? Let me show you. So if we look at this dad, okay, what is he able to pass on? He is able to pass on this chromosome or this chromosome, okay? If because meiosis will basically choose one. Now, in meiosis, so if he passes on this one, what is he passing on? He's passing on lowercase f, capital H. So he's passing on this. If he passes on this one, he passes on uppercase f, lowercase h, right? So he will be able to pass on this or this. The mom will be able to pass on this or this, okay? So because these genes are, when you move this gene, when this gene is passed on, this gene will also be passed on. We call them linked. They are kind of associated. So when this one is passed on to your kid, this one will also be passed on. But we'll talk about this more in the next video. So don't worry about this linked idea too much. That's going to happen in the next video. So this is just a recap image of what alleles you need to have this trait. So now, let's look at, we're making now a dihybrid cross. So remember, before we did a monohybrid cross, one gene. Now we're looking at two genes. So like I said, if you're the dad, you can pass on this combination. So let's look. Small f, capital H, right? Small f, capital H, or big F, lowercase h. This is what they can pass on, either this or this. You put in the same box because they're linked, okay? You either pass on this or you pass on this, right? Now the mom would pass on capital F, capital H, or capital F, lowercase h, right? So that's what she can pass on. Now we do the same thing as the other one. We're going to see the possibilities. So genotype and phenotype. So the genotype could be FF, so capital F, we write them next to each other, HH, okay? So this person, one possibility is capital F, which is what? They're both dominant, meaning the earlobe is free, so free earlobe. And then the other one is capital H, lowercase h, which means what? Straight thumb, right? Because the only way to have the hitchhiker's thumb is both lowercase. So that's one possibility. Now, what if the mom passes on this one and the dad passes on this one? What's going to happen then? Then we can have this. Free earlobe, hitchhiker's thumb, okay? So it's the same thing, free earlobe, but now because the mom and the dad passed on the lowercase h, now we can have the hitchhiker's thumb. And then we have this one, free lobe, straight thumb. This one, free lobe, straight thumb. So you can again see there are so many different combinations that can happen. And this dihybrid cross so easily shows it to us. But only 1 in 4 was able to make a hitchhiker's thumb, right? Okay, so that should be simple enough. Key things you need to understand now, again, is the monohybrid cross is this little table we make to show the possibilities that the offspring could have based on knowing the parent's gene for one trait, for one specific trait. And the dihybrid cross is the exact same thing, but we're using what? 2 traits, okay? So now we're 2 traits. Now, that was quite straightforward, but there's something we didn't consider, crossing over, okay? If you know meiosis, you know crossing over, and we completely ignored crossing over. So I explained to you dihybrid cross without crossing over, because monohybrid doesn't matter. Monohybrid crossing over doesn't influence anything, okay? Let me show you. So remember how we have this here? During meiosis 1, your chromosomes can line up, right? But they can cross over, meaning you can exchange some DNA. So for example, you can see here, this DNA here switched over with this DNA here, okay? So what this means is this. When your mom undergoes meiosis, what could happen is crossing over, meaning not only is she able to pass on red and blue or red and brown, but also she's able to pass on, let's say, red. Let me see here. Wait. For this one, it doesn't matter. For the mom, it doesn't matter. But if we look at the dad's one, more combinations are possible. Let me show you. The dad can pass on green and blue, can pass on red and brown, or if crossing over happens, meaning let's say this part exchanges with this part, then he can pass on red and blue, like this here. Notice, meiosis didn't allow, in this case, meiosis didn't allow the dad to pass on this one or this one, but crossing over happened, so now he passed on a mix, a gene, a combination that isn't obvious from the beginning because meiosis made it happen. Okay, so this is one important thing you need to notice. We did not consider crossing over. Crossing over will give even more combinations, right? Because without crossing over, we already had a bunch of combinations. But crossing over can make it even more complicated, right? So that is something we did not consider in this video. So pay that in mind. We did do dihybrid cross, but we did not consider dihybrid cross with crossing over. And that's going to be the purpose of the next video. We're going to talk about dihybrid crosses with gene linkage and crossing over considered as well, not just without crossing over, okay? But notice, for monohybrid cross, it doesn't matter. Look, even if crossing over happened, let's say this one crossed over with that one, so now the red one is here and the green one is here, it doesn't matter because for a monohybrid trait, so one trait, you'll still only pass on the green or the red one. It doesn't matter if it switched over to this chromosome or switched over to this chromosome, you can still only pass on green or red, right? So notice crossing over doesn't influence a single gene, but when we consider dihybrid crosses, meaning two genes, then it may influence it, okay? So bear that in mind. But that will be made more clear in the next video. Now, I want you to try this out to see if you really understand it. So determine the genotype of the child of these two there's a great sentence. The genotype of the child that these two parents could have. Okay, so I'm telling you, the mom has this, the dad has this. Okay, now figure it out. So what this means is before here, I showed you what they have. Okay, so it's easy to figure it out. It was easy to figure out the cross. Okay, because I showed you what they had. Now I'm telling you this. Now I'm telling you they have this. So this could mean that the mom has FH. Look, because it could even, let me show you. The mom could have this, big F, big H. It could also be big F, small h. It could either be maybe small f, small h, right? So the point is, because I'm not showing you the exact chromosomes and where they're at on the chromosomes, it could be a bit more complicated. So you will have to look at this and figure out the potential things that it could be. So the mom, if I tell you this is her genotype, you should know that it could be big F, big H. That's one possibility. It could be big F, small h. That's one possibility. It could be small f, big H. That's one possibility. It could be small f, small h. That's another possibility. Okay? So you should know that and then write them down. You'll see what's going to happen next. If I tell you that dad has small f, and small h, like this is his genotype, FFH, let me write it again, FH, or whatever, however I decide to write it. Wait, I messed up. FFHH. What's the possibility? Only F and small h. Only small f, small h, right? No matter what you do with that genotype, the only possibility is small f, small h, right? Nothing else, okay? That's the only possibility. So now what we do is we put it in the dihybrid cross. And again, we're assuming no crossing over in this video, meaning there's no switching around stuff, okay? So now look, the mom was able to pass on all of these, so we put it into the table. The dad was only able to do this, and then we can reveal the combinations, and that will tell us the possibilities your child could have. So you're gonna get this kind of question or an easier question, but this is probably the hardest question you can get because you have to figure out all the possibilities and then make a dihybrid cross out of that to determine the child's possibilities. So here's some definitions just for you. I hope this video made sense. In the next video, like I said, we're going to talk about what happens if there's also crossing over, okay?